After almost 2 decades in prison, one of the nation's most notorious criminals is now free. Today, a Supreme Court justice granted Abdul Nacer Benbrika's release under an extended supervision order, finding the risk of offending is now low enough that it is capable of being managed by Mr Benbrika living in the community. For the next year, Benbrika will have to follow more than 30 strict conditions, including wearing an electronic monitoring device, living at a fixed address with a curfew, participating in psychological treatment and de-radicalisation programs, while also being banned from associating with people convicted of terror offences.
That's a good balance between a risk that we can't completely determine and means that we have to minimise that risk.
The 12-month order issued despite federal authorities pushing for 3 years of monitoring instead.
The judge has said it should last for 1 year, and we can all consider whether or not it needs to be considered after that.
Benbrika was convicted in 2008 of plotting terror attacks on Australian landmarks, actions he denied.
I'm not involved in anything here. I am teaching my brothers here the Quran and the Sunnah.
He was jailed for 15 years, but his sentence was extended in 2020 for another 3 years.
I'm satisfied that the defendant has not renounced or changed his previous beliefs.
Then Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton stripped Benbrika of his citizenship. But last month, the High Court ruled the laws were invalid, prompting the Albanese government to hastily pass new laws giving courts the power to revoke citizenship, although that can't be applied retrospectively to Benbrika.
What I've asked for from the court, an extended supervision order, it's the strongest possible order that I was able to ask for, and that's why we asked for it.
Why have they not used preventative detention legislation that exists? Why have they not done every single thing that they could?
If Benbrika fails to comply with the strict conditions of his release, he faces the prospect of being hauled before the courts and being sent back into custody. The Attorney-General wants to see the court's full reasons before deciding how authorities handle Benbrika's case from here.
Today's decision fuels the narrative the opposition's been running against the government for some time, arguing that it's solely responsible for a situation where a convicted terrorist like Benbrika is released into the community. Weeks after almost 150 people housed in immigration detention, some of whom are convicted serious criminals, were also freed as a result of another court ruling. In both instances, the coalition insists the government failed to use every power available to it to keep dangerous people behind bars. But in both instances, it ignores findings by judges that laws, policies and practices were deficient. Benbrika is still an Australian citizen because coalition-era laws stripping him of that privilege was struck out by the High Court. And the coalition was savaged by the judge and the national security watchdog for the way it handled previous efforts to keep him detained. Responsibility doesn't fall solely on one side of the political aisle, even though it's now a case Labor has to manage in the court of public opinion.